1995 was an interesting year for wrestling, to say the least. The Monday Night Wars began, and with that would eventually come a shift to a more realistic and less over the top personas and presentation. That shift, however, did not come right away, and WCW's main feud heading into Fall Brawl that year is an example of the then more cartoony nature of the sport. On the one side, you had a stable full of bizarre and dastardly villains led by the menacing Taskmaster, and on the other, you had the larger than life superheroes led by the one and only Hulk Hogan. It would be the clash of Hulkamania and the Dungeon of Doom inside the murderous War Games structure. However, that is not the only narrative, as Arn Anderson and Ric Flair, former allies in the Horsemen, square off. Two title matches and a number one contenders match also compose part of the offering for this, the first pay-per-view of the Nitro era and of my Liquid Nitro blog. Due to some writer's block issues, I've decided to turn this into a video format, at least for some of the pay-per-views. Major pay-per-views such as Bash at the Beach 96 will be done in writing. We open live in the Asheville Civic Center as Tony Schiavone, who we hear for the first time for the blog, tells us that WCW is where the big boys play. And when you include the intro from the pay-per-view saying that Lex Luger has returned from behind enemy lines, that's two pot shots at WWF in the space of a couple of minutes. The dual rings are set up, and the cage that will close the fighters in our main event hands overhead. And thankfully, we don't have to deal with Steve Mongo McMichael tonight as Bobby Heenan joins Tony. Tony talks about how Hogan is fighting the Dungeon since July, and how earlier this evening the Giant destroyed, with a monster truck, Hogan's motorcycle, which the fans game at Bash at the Beach. Heenan claims that the Giant is sorry that Hogan wasn't run over on the bike as well. We get a doozy of an opener to start the pay-per-view as Flying Brian Pillman and Johnny B. Bad will do battle to see who gets the next shot at the United States Heavyweight Championship. Heenan makes a Mayberry joke as a shot at Asheville while Bad throws frisbees, accidentally throwing one into a turnbuckle and having to rethrow it. The first botch of the night goes to a frisbee. I tell you, those dang things are the most uncooperative workers in the ring, I tell you what. We get our introductions from Michael Buffer, who points out that the match has a 20-minute time limit, keep this in mind, and we are underway. Bad briefly pushes Pillman to the corner on a lockup, but that ends quickly, and we get a handshake between the two to really start the match. Bad gets a quick arm drag for the two to trade waist locks, and hammer locks. Pillman is able to take control of the hip toss and the headlock takedown, keeping his friend grounded until Bad powers up and pushes him to the ropes. But Pillman knocks him out with a shoulder block, as we repeatedly hear throughout the match about how these two were friends leading into this match. A series of dodges and leapfrogs and ducks falls from both men before they simultaneously go for a dropkick. Both men more or less whiff, and we're back to square one. Pillman starts to rein the arm, but Bad is able to work out of it and throw him by the wrist, and Pillman backs off again. Bad starts an arm wringer of his own and turns it into a hammerlock, but as he tries to get a back suplex out of it, Pillman counters into a modified snapmare. And another side headlock takedown follows as Schiavone and Heenan spend a lot of time talking about War Games and the Giant. Bad gets back to his feet and pushes him to the ropes, but gets the worst of a simultaneous attempt at what may have been an arm drag. Pillman starts to work the left arm of Bad after a 2 count, adding a snapmare, but when he tries for an elbow drop, Bad trips him up and then cradles him for 1, but Pillman gets a foot on the ropes. Now we're back to Bad working the arm as Pillman does a lot of smiling during this match. No, I'm not counting his corpsing. Heenan starts calling Bad Steen's pet when Schiavone talks about how Steen trained him. Schiavone, needless to say, is unamused as Pillman trips him up and then uses a body scissors to transition to a bridging pin that gets 2. A snapmare from Pillman goes into a chin lock as camera focuses on a kid with a Bobby the Brain Heenan for President sign. Bad gets to his feet and elbows out of the hold, but when he whips Pillman to the corner, Pillman catches him with a flying head scissors and a roll for 2. Pillman wastes no time going back to a headlock as one can see blood coming between Bad's eyes. He lets him up and chops him into the corner, but when he whips him across, Bad ducks another head scissors attempt and throws him back to the center with an arm drag before settling into a headlock of his own. Commentary heavily promotes Nitro during the sequence. Pillman is able to fight his way back to his feet and shoves to the ropes, but Bad impressively counters an arm drag back into the headlock. Pillman's able to get up and get out with backbreaker and only gets 2, but then he puts Bad in the Boston Crab. And the fans at this point are very much behind Bad, much to Pillman's disgust, so he lets go of the hold a completely of his own and then just flat out punches Johnny B. Bad. Pillman starts getting caught. Keenan chops his opponent on the ropes, but Bad catches him on the whip with a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker for 2, and then going to a standing toe hold to keep Pillman grounded before elbow dropping the left knee. He keeps working the leg for a while, and when Pillman attempts to biceps his way out of it, Bad turns into one of the most unique versions of a surfboard I've ever seen. Pillman's able to get to the ropes, and when they get up, he flat out just shoves Bad. And so Bad gets up and pushes Pillman down as well. But when he gets to the corner, Pillman gets in several shots. Bad fights back with punches and drives Pillman from the ring, and Pillman decides to take a bit of a walk. He re-enters the ring and after a few seconds offer a handshake, but Bad's not falling for it, and Schiavone speculates that the friendship may be over as Pillman tosses Bad out of the ring and comes back over the top rope with a leg drop for 2. And right away we go back to the headlocks. Pillman tosses Bad out of the ring, attacks him as he tries to turn the apron. Bad rams down the turnbuckle, and then he comes back over the top rope with a leg drop. Ahead of myself. Pillman powers his way up, and we get a leapfrog sequence, which ends, amusingly enough, with both men trying to leapfrog at the same time and colliding. Bad manages to get to his feet first, but a headbutt knocks him back down, only for Pillman to also collapse. He's up first, though, and he rams Bad's head into the corner before pushing him out of the ring. Buffer declares that 5 minutes remain as Pillman tries to bring Bad back into the vertical suplex, but Bad suplexes him out and to the floor, and he rolls back in. Bad then catches Pillman with a top rope plancha as Pillman tries to get back in the ring. He rolls him back in and goes to the top rope. Whatever he had in mind is thwarted when Pillman drop kicks him in midair for 2. Pillman then whips Bad to the ropes, only to be clubbed in the back followed by a sit-out powerbomb, which only gets 2. Bad tries to whip of his own, but gets countered into a tilt-a-whirl into a tombstone piledriver, which only gets 2 at the 3-minute warning. And yes, I did just say 3 minutes. Nothing? Anyway, Pillman takes Bad back to the corner and sets up for a tornado DDT, but Bad shoves into the mat, covers for 2. He goes to receive armbar of sorts, and 2 minutes left. He tries something else, but whatever it was to be gets countered by Pillman into a Russian leg sweep into another armbar variant. It gets transitioned to an abdominal stretch with 1 minute to go. We get the arm raising spot where Bad's arm stays up on the third try, and he fights back to his feet, getting whipped but coming back with a face slam followed by his Tutti Frutti punch, but Pillman is under the ropes to prevent the 3. As Bad is arguing with the ref, Pillman rolls outside, springboards him with a clothesline and only gets 2, and as time expires, he goes for a backslide. Referee Nick Patrick, however, decides there must be a winner and restarts the match under sudden death rules, much to the joy of the crowd in Nashville. Pillman quickly attacks Bad in the corner, but Bad fights back and sends him to the outside, only to get flare chops when he falls Pillman out. He tries to fight back, only to get whipped into the guardrail. Pillman rolls him back in and goes up top, but the missile dropkick collides with a dropkick from Bad, and both men crash and burn. They get to their feet before Patrick gets anywhere near a 10 count, and Bad gets whipped into a sleeper hole. Pillman drags him down, but once again the arm doesn't drop a third time, and Bad is able to get to the ropes. He fights his way back up and whips Pillman into a sleeper of his own, but Pillman is able to suplex his way out of danger. He sets him on top turnbuckle and slaps Bad before coming up himself, but the superplex is denied as Bad shoves him back down and dives for a stunning sunset flip powerbomb that somehow only gets 2. Bad pulls him up and goes for another powerbomb, only for it to get reversed to a Frankensteiner for 2. Pillman chops him and tries to catch him in a crucifix off a whip, only to get Samoan drop for 2. He then gets set up on the top rope, and Bad sends him flying with the Bad Day, but that also doesn't get the 3. He sets Pillman up for a second Bad Day, but Pillman stops it and nails the tornado DDT. Again, all he gets is a near fall. So now he goes to the top rope, but Bad is up, and he stumbles backwards into the ropes, and Pillman has a pretty rough landing. Bad then goes to the apron and launches him to the rail before going over the ropes with his Bad Mood plancha, and that connects. He throws him back in the ring, but a springboard splash fails, and Pillman gets the knees up, and once again, just a near fall. Pillman suplexes him onto the top rope, and Bad falls to the floor, giving the opportunity for a suicide dive through the ropes. He merely grazes Bad, however, and Patrick starts counting both men out. Patrick makes it to the ring. Pillman makes it to the ring first and springboards on top of turnbuckle as Bad tries to pull himself back in with the stairs, but Bad ducks and Pillman's groin is victimized by top rope again. Bad goes for the cover, but Patrick stops it when he notices Bad is still under the bottom rope. Frustrated, Bad whips Pillman into the ropes only for the clothesline to be ducked. Pillman rebounds, but his clothesline misses, and the two rebound and collide with dueling cross bodies, but Bad gets the better of it and covers Pillman to finally get the 3. The match was a bit slow early on, but there was quite a few. It was a hell of a match to start the show. Both men had a lot of familiarity with each other's moves. That probably kind of was why it started real slow. But they got plenty of time to switch to work wonders. And it's an excellent opener, so that means the rest of the show is a very long way to catch up. Schiavone and Heenan then run down to card for the rest of the night, taking time to talk about Ric Flair versus Arn Anderson, a feud for which Heenan promptly blames Hulk Hogan. Speaking of Flair, he's backstage with Mean Gene. Flair talks about how he and Arn watched people come and go for 15 years but stayed bonded. Now, however, they'll be walking to the ring, not side by side, he says, but from opposite ends. Okerlund asks if he hates Anderson, and Flair replies that he loves him, but he says he loves him so much that one of them will have to explain to their children that there's only room for one king of the hill, and Flair says he'll be it. Have I ever mentioned yet how much I love listening to Ric Flair's promos? Up next, we have Cobra versus Sergeant Craig Pittman. Cobra is a wrestler by the name of Jeff Farmer, who you might know from his infamous Full Force promo. However, we'll see him later on this blog as something else entirely. The storyline in this is that Pittman, who was a legit Marine, was Cobra's commanding officer during the first Gulf War but abandoned him during a mission, which led to Cobra coming to WCW for revenge. Pittman doesn't come down the ramp, however, and instead a young cadet walks out and tells Cobra he has a message from Pittman. As Cobra is yelling at the cadet to leave, Pittman rappels down from the ceiling and sneaks into the ring to choke Cobra from behind with his bullet belt. The ref sees this, but it's too late to stop Pittman from dragging his opponent down, so the bell rings as soon as he gets the belt away from the ex-Marine, who salutes the cadets. Pittman starts pounding away at Cobra, who puts up no fight whatsoever, and then throws him out of the ring before going to the apron and executing a diving stomp to the knee. The beating does indeed continue, and Pittman's morale is just fine until Cobra reverses a whip and sends him into the ring post. He sends him back into the ring, climbs to the top turnbuckle, but Pittman slams him down with one hand in midair, overlocking in the Code Red crossarm breaker, and the referee stops it. That was it. And it barely took me less time to tell you about the match than the match itself took. There's not even any good comments. I guess you have to have something to cool the crowd down after how good the opening match was, but the hell? So we cut back to Tony and the Brain. Tony and the Brain, it's Tony and the Brain. One is a genius, the other's insane. Oh, sorry. We go to the announcers to talk about how bad Paul Orndorff has been doing lately, culminating in a loss to Randy Savage on an episode of WCW Worldwide. We then go to footage of Orndorff's locker room after that match. He's throwing his robe, headbutting mirrors, generally being unhappy. And then he gets a knock on the door, and famed psychic and spiritual healer Gary Spivey walks in. He tells Orndorff they had envisioned that Mr. Wonderful wasn't doing so well, but that he's still Mr. Wonderful. With some encouragement, Orndorff starts seeing himself as being Mr. Wonderful again. It's plenty cheesy, but it's pretty damn funny. We get DDP with Kimberly and Max Muscle versus the Renegade with Jimmy Hart up next for Renegade's Television Championship. Kimberly, aka the Diamond Doll, gets more cheers than DDP, but DDP is the heel anyway, so whatever. We get an odd discussion of Heenan's high school dating habits, I have no real reason why. I always forgot that Renegade, by the way, was a bad Ultimate Warrior clone, just with a singlet. He climbs the turnbuckle and holds up the belt and jumps right off into a boot to the gut. DDP gets all the offense early, including a nice Russian leg sweep that gets floated into a cover, but Renegade no-sells a headbutt and DDP falls outside, which causes a pretty funny sequence where DDP walks right into the ring post and flops backwards into the front row. Renegade sends him back to the ring as Tony calls them two of WCW's premier stars. Renegade, a premier star in WCW, really? DDP tries to get back on offense, but Renegade no-sells again, and we get a long headlock spot where DDP keeps trying to force a rope break, only get pulled away, or at the end, dropped off the rope. DDP quickly starts choking him on the top rope and then falls with a flying hot shot he calls a Zircon cutter, because Renegade isn't a real diamond, you see. A swinging neckbreaker follows as Kimberly complains into the camera about having to hold up a 10 sign. DDP keeps abusing the champ and sends him out, but Renegade eventually attempts a sunset flip, which turns into a short cover countering sequence. DDP regains control as commentary remarks that this is the longest match Renegade has had to this point. Renegade ducks a corner shoulder tackle, though, and after a couple of clotheslines, he hits a beautiful handspring backsplash into the corner, followed by a double axe handle for 2. DDP gets a shoulder jawbreaker and a nice flying DDT, but when he goes for the almighty diamond cutter, bing, Renegade shoves him in the corner, gets a roll up for 2. Max gets on the apron, but DDP gets whipped into him, and Renegade gets a power slam before going to the top rope and dropping Max with a shoulder tackle. Max grabs his leg as he tries to re-enter, though, and it allows DDP to hit the almighty diamond cutter to win the title. Afterwards, he runs off without Kimberly, who's not happy about this match at all. Yeah, that was a decent match. Renegade, he had a couple moments like the hand sprint and splash that I thought were really good, but I mean, in the end, he doesn't really appear to be anything special to me. And we're a long way away from the later magic that is DDP. The really good DDP run. It's not a bad match, though. Tag title match comes up next as Harlem Heat take on the champs Bunkhouse Buck, a.k.a. Jack Swagger Sr., for those who might remember that, and Dick Slater. Much is made of the romance between Sister Sherry, Harlem Heat's manager, and Colonel Robert Parker, Buck and Slater's manager, with Heenan going on about how beautiful the kids will look, and with Tony Schiavone laughing. But Heenan was going on about all the little boys with white top hats and diamond rings, and the girls with Sherry's dresses. That was a really odd sequence. Slater and Booker T start with some basic corner work, and at one point Buck is patting Slater on the back. How does the referee not call that a tag? I don't get it. Before going to the mat for some basic mat work. Harlem Heat is in control early as Tony and the Brain put them over on commentary as being, just because they were street fighters doesn't necessarily mean they aren't polished wrestlers. And they make a similar point with Slater and Buck being country boys, but also being polished wrestlers themselves. Buck tries to wrestle control away early, but the challengers keep it with good solid tag work and Harlem sidekick from Booker. And meanwhile, Sherry has a flower from Robert Parker, which she puts in a very interesting spot in the front of her dress. In any event, she's still very fired up as she's watching her team go. The champs don't finally get control till Slater tags in. When Stevie Ray goes for the corner puncher, Slater counters it to an atomic drop followed by a neck breaker. It doesn't last long as Stevie does reclaim control, but only for a few seconds because not long afterwards, Booker gets tagged back in. Slater sends him over the top rope but doesn't get DQ'd. The ref doesn't see it because we still have that stupid rule. And Booker lands on the steps ass first and then gets blindsided by Buck. So the champs now are in control as Booker T frequently gets mauled. And meanwhile, Heenan is going on about Hogan demanding that his War Games team take polygraph tests. Okay, nobody cares about Hogan and War Games during this match. Slater apologized Booker for 2 as commentary keeps talking about the War Games match. And Booker again gets sent over the top rope. Slater sends him back in and Buck gets a chin lock, but Booker powers out only to miss what appears to be some sort of hip attack in the corner. I can't think of what else to call it. It looks like he's trying to go for a leg lariat or something. It looked weird. Booker continues to be on the wrong end of double teams as we still keep hearing about War Games, and by this point, I just want the damn match to happen so I don't have to hear about it anymore. Slater gets Booker in a Boston Crab, but a sidekick to the head from Stevie breaks up, only for Buck to run in and put a half Boston on Booker. The ref doesn't see the tag, but takes Slater his word that he did. Buck whips Booker the ropes, but he makes a mistake of ducking his head and he gets scissors kicked. So Stevie finally gets tagged back in and he goes wild, decking both members of the tag champs. He scoop slams and power slams everybody, but Slater's able to send him out through the ropes and the champs beat up on Booker, who has to kick out a pin by Buck at 1, even though he's not the legal man. Then we cut to the other ring where Parker and Sherry are both on the apron, and Sherry gets in the ring and starts crawling toward Parker, and he just jumps right over the rope. And to be fair, I probably would have too. So they end up kissing, and that's enough of a distraction for the Nasty Boys to run out, deck Slater with one of his own boots, run off, and Booker gets the pin. Stevie gets the pin and wins the championship, and Parker doesn't seem to care because he's still making out with Sherry. Then Harlem Heat show up and they see Sherry making out and they're not happy, but she's insisting, hey, I was just tricking him in order to win you the belt back. So afterwards, Buck tears Parker a new one on the entrance ramp. Gene Okerlund is there and he's backing Buck up. Parker insists he'll get them a rematch and sends his former champs to the showers. And he goes on about how he's unhappy his team lost, but he's in love with Sherry, declaring that he feels 20 years old again. And Okerlund is clearly trying not to laugh. I normally don't like interference to end good matches, and this was a very good match. But, if it leads to something, it tends to be different, especially if it leads to something good. I have a feeling this will hopefully lead to something good. And I like how it ties in with the whole romance angle. We then go to a video package of the feud between Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, which includes a clip of Flair with his family, which includes a future queen of WWE, before we have Okerlund interviewing Anderson himself. Anderson's fired up and he's going on about respect, family, and standing up for oneself. I must say, I think he was always one of the more underrated promo men, and he's really good here. The entrances indicate a bit of a 60-40 split in Arn's favor initially, as some of the roster have taken seats with the fans. Like off camera, it's mentioned that the Nasty Boys are in the audience, and they do cut to the American males. Brian Pillman singing together, Colonel Parker and Big Bubba are singing together, and Alex Wright and Eddie Guerrero are singing together. First time I got to see Eddie Guerrero on WCW programming, because I can't find the pre-show stuff. Both men trade moves early on before Arn starts shoving him around, delivers a huge slap to the face. Flair goes down and rolls outside, but when he comes back in, Arn starts working on his left arm and slaps in the face again. A lot of technical mat work follows, much of it dominated by Arn. We continuously get cuts to the roster ringside as Arn Anderson works him off a wristlock, but Flair is able to work his way out, and he delivers a signature knife-edge chop to knock Arn down. Flair starts to work the left leg as Tony shills the WCW hotline. Anderson is able to fight back and gets Flair in a sleeper, but Flair drives him back to the corner to break out. As he tries to recover, though, Anderson goes to the middle rope and drops Flair with a knee strike to the back. The left arm remains a target for Anderson for quite some time, including with an arm lock scoop slam. Flair tries to chop his way out of an arm lock, but Anderson forces him back to the mat and keeps the lock on. He then stomps on that arm and pulls Flair to the ring post, slamming the arm into it twice before getting back in the ring and dropping with an arm breaker. Flair gets forced into the corner where he finally breaks out with a chop, but Anderson whips him off to the next corner where Flair flips over the turnbuckle and tries to he suckers Arn into attempting to clothesline off the apron, but Rick pulls the rope down and sends Arn flying. And then we see the most unthinkable thing happen. Ric Flair actually hits a move from the top rope. He dives off outside with an axe handle and it hits. Such savagery. Flair finally takes control as he beats Arn up on the outside, and before the action goes back to the ring where Flair attacks Arn while Arn is still on the apron. He then lays in Arn with his signature knee drops before several unsuccessful covers with his feet on the ropes. Anderson's able to fight back though, and he back body drops him for a couple twos of his own. Flair starts begging Arn off, but Anderson tries to punch him, only for Flair to low blow him when the ref tries to stop Anderson. Anderson gets tossed back outside and gets shot, but he catches charging Flair with another back body drop before starting to punch him on the ground. Flair's able to suplex him though, and it does it again inside the ring, but they're both certainly suffering the effects of how hard the match has been at this point, as a chop leaves Arn flopping on the ropes before Flair gets two off a chop from the corner. Arn attempts a sunset flip, and Flair attempts to counter with a punch, but Arn slides away and the fist meets the canvas. Flair gets whipped into the corner and ends up in the Tree of Woe as Anderson delivers more punishment. Flair falls off eventually. It looks like he's planking almost 2 decades before that was a thing. Arn calls for the DDT, but Flair grabs the ropes and Arn lands on his back. And then we get the classic Flair flop. And the classic Flair goes up top and gets thrown off by whoever he's facing spot. Arn then goes to the top, but Flair catches him with a clothesline when he jumps before he goes to the dreaded, copyright, figure 4. Arn blocks it momentarily, but Flair's able to lock it on. He spits at Arn, and that angers the enforcer enough to reverse it into an Indian deathlock for a few seconds before breaking it all together. Both men are slow to get out, but Flair chop blocks him back down. He goes for the dreaded, copyright, figure 4 again, but Arn counters into a small package for 2, only for Flair to kick him in the knee when he tries to get back up. Flair starts to work on him in the corner, and when he tries to whip him, Arn falls right down because his knee's given out. Pillman suddenly jumps the barricade and gets on the apron at this point, which distracts Flair from finishing Arn off. They trade punches, but when Flair turns, he gets kicked in the back of the head by Pillman, allowing Arn to finish him off with a DDT. Pillman gets chased out by the American males as the rather pro-Flair by now crowd boos. Again, I normally don't like interference of at least 10-0 afterwards, but I'm guessing that Pillman and Flair are going to lock horns big time sooner rather than later. And this match was excellent. Starting off technical, they got into psychological territory towards the end. Hopefully they face each other a few more times down the line. And mercifully, we finally arrive at the War Games match. We get a promo package with some bizarre close-ups of Kevin Sullivan's face as he rants on and 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 on. It's far more annoying than it is creepy or frightening, to be honest. We then get another package as a match build itself, despite the fact that Heenan is insisting he has something to say and he gets mad at Tony for constantly interrupting him. Then we go backstage to the Hulkamaniacs, who are all in camo paint and gear, and they seem to be on good terms as Mean Gene Okerlund compares the team to the Allies on D-Day. Yeah, right. And Hogan's in full crazy mode, saying they drank a lot of Agent Orange and now they're impervious to pain. What? Savage says that Steen was able to get him on Luger's side, so they are now a unified team, and Steen goes nuts as well. Luger also assures Steen that the team is won, as Hogan calls the Dungeon of Doom the Dungeon of Goom, meaning he's made one verbal slip-up while I've made about 1,000. And he reminds everyone that if his team wins, he gets the Taskmaster alone in the ring for 5 minutes. My feeling is that this team had way too much coffee that morning. Michael Buffer gets us started with a cry of, "Let the games begin!" as the War Games cage lures around the ring. The Dungeon and the Taskmaster come out first, getting pretty wild introductions from Buffer. And the Hulkamaniacs come out next, and Hogan, you can hear, is getting some boos. And yes, Buffer does his catchphrase. Steen and Shark start off the match. The former Earthquake gets the better of Steen early, but Steen's able to fire back and even gets a scoop slam. He seems to his back in the process, however, and he fails to scoop him a second time. Shark quickly goes to work with a bear hug to kill some time. Steen escapes with belt claps and biting, and Shark gets stuck between both rings when he tries to dive. He does catch Steen when the latter attempts to dive into the zone, however, and dumps him back into the second ring. As he tries to climb over, Sting crotches him on the top rope, and once the big man is on the mat, Sting tries to keep him down by targeting his legs. Sting has him in the Scorpion Deathlock as the first period expires, and the Dungeon wins the coin toss, which sends in Zodiac, who promptly starts getting beat up by Sting. Shark has recovered by this time, though, and he and Zodiac start double teaming Sting. Savage enters next to help Sting, but to no avail as he gets teamed up on while the rest of the Dungeon manage to reach under the cage to hold a still down Sting back. Sting finally gets loose and tries to even the odds, but the roles end up reversed, and he gets beaten down, and Savage gets pulled halfway out of the cage. Sting is finally able to get some offense on Zodiac, but Kamala comes in next, and the numbers continue to be a problem until Luger finally enters, and he knocks Zodiac down right away before knocking both Kamala and Shark off their feet. So for the first time since the first 5 minutes, it's mostly controlled by the Hulkamaniacs for that period until Zodiac dugs a Luger clothesline and he accidentally hits Savage from behind. And immediately, Savage and Luger start fighting, and Sting's desperately trying to stop them as Main enters. Main's the one who managed to stop the fighting as he takes all 3 men out, and we're back to the Dungeon being ahead. And then everyone starts counting down, and Hogan finally enters, and there's still quite a few boos. And then he decides to go full Dale Gribble. Pocket sand! Yeah, that's what happens. Comes in, pocket sand! Which I believe is the Zodiac. Goes over to Kamala. Pocket sand! He then beats the full hell out of Zodiac, and Sting goes, pocket sand! At Kamala. So the next few minutes are just the Hulkamaniacs beating the Dungeon up and beating the Dungeon up until Hogan finally puts Zodiac in a camel clutch and Zodiac surrenders. Taskmaster tries to make a break for it, but the future ally of BJ Whitmer is forced to get in the cage by Sting and security. Hogan promptly starts throwing throws Kevin Sullivan into the walls, and Sullivan's attempt to escape and climb the cage fail as he gets thrown off the wall and then back into the cage. But no sooner does Hogan hit the big boot than the Giant walks down the ring. He throws the ref around before entering the cage and jumping, I said jumping, over the top ropes. He grabs Hogan from behind and Hogan tries to fight back, but Giant grabs him by the head and seems to do the hardest neck crank I've ever seen. Hogan collapses limp to the canvas and the Hulkamaniacs come running back out, but the damage is already done. Buffer calls for medics as the Giant leaves and the show ends. The match was okay. Maybe it's just me, but I felt the Hulkamaniacs, considering you have Sting and Sting and Savage, who are among the 2 top guys, who are among the top guys, I should say, are getting beat down a lot. And it didn't sit well with me. And then they get some advantage when Luger comes in, but then lose it again. I mean, granted, you have the numbers game come into play, but still. And, of course, Hogan comes in, and all of a sudden, all is well. Still, it was not a bad match, but not something I'd go back to watching again. So, that is Fall Brawl 95, and it was a good show at times, but it's not necessarily something I would go back to watch. I mean, the Craig Pittman versus Cobra squash was just there, and War Games was okay, but nothing really memorable. Same with DDP versus Renegade. Thankfully, there are 3 other good matches that managed to even this out, and while I wouldn't exactly go back and watch the show again, I think at least the 3 big matches I liked, which were Pillman versus Johnny B. Bad, the tag title match, and Flair versus Anderson, I think are worth going back and, or I think, finding and watching. So with that, the first of my many pay-per-view trudgings, as some of them will probably turn out to be, is finished. The next entry in my blog will be a written one because thankfully it'll just be an episode of Nitro, which is an hour long at this point. I hope to see some good stuff moving forward from it, from this pay-per-view. Because now we begin the build toward Halloween Havoc. Yeah, we're a long way from Starrcade and stuff like that, but whatever. Half the show is not really worth watching, but the other half manages to almost balance it out. So my final rating for this Fall Brawl 95 is 2 3/4 stars out of 4.